Hey dudes, and welcome back to The Bants. As always, I am your host, The Bants, and it's Monday once again, the beginning of the week, so it's time for another What's Happening in Fashion this week, so let's just get right into it. And first up, as always, we have our headlines for the day. And in our first headline of the day, it was just announced that we are losing another fashion designer to another luxury house. In this case, we are losing Haider Ackermann to Berluti. Man, designers are just dropping like flies nowadays, aren't they? But in this case, as opposed to many of the other cases that have been happening over the last couple weeks, I really don't consider this a bad thing. I don't think Haider Ackermann at Berluti was necessarily a good or a bad thing, and I think giving him more time to focus on his main brand is probably better for everyone. And aside from that too, since Berluti is part of the LVMH conglomerate, there has been rumors that Chris Van Ash will be stepping in to take over his place, and I could never see that as a bad thing. But as always, best of luck to you, Haider Ackermann. I'm really excited to see what you can go back to doing now that you're able to put 100% back into your own label, and I'm excited to see what comes next for Berluti as well. Then, in some rather exciting news, going back to Dior Homme now, with their newest artistic director in the form of Kim Jones, they actually have a new jewelry designer as well in the face of Yoon. For those of you who don't know who Yoon is, let me give you a brief history of who she is. Basically, she's been a tastemaker in the industry for well over a decade now, even though it's been a little bit more on the hush-hush recently, just because she hasn't been as well-known or as hype as some of the other people out there. But even so, still a huge driving force, especially in Japan. And aside from being a tastemaker and a style icon, she is also one of the duo behind Japanese jewelry company Ambush with her husband Verbal, who you guys might know as being, close friends with Kanye West and Nigo, member of Teriyaki Boys, things along that line. But going back to Ambush quickly, it's a brand that's been around now for a very long time, well over a decade, and has made some really crazy, really interesting, really experimental pieces over the years. And when it comes down to it, definitely one of the more fun and exciting jewelry brands out there, and there's definitely quality behind it as well. So seeing Yoon and Ambush getting a little bit of notoriety, a little bit more time in the limelight after so long for this, I'm just stoked. I think it's fucking awesome, and I guarantee that she's going to do a fantastic job for them at the company. So best of luck to you, Yoon, and congratulations. Alright, and let's move on to our art stories for the day. And first off, with Highsnobiety fresh off their recap of Art Basel Hong Kong last week, Hypebeast has now done their own recap, so if you want to see some more images from the galleries there, definitely check this out. Then it was announced that Takashi Murakami will finally be having a new gallery showing in the United States, this time in New York City at the end of the month, all the way into the month of June. So if you happen to be in New York anytime relatively soon, definitely be on the lookout for that. Otherwise, like the rest of us, be on the lookout for gallery images soon. Then Albertina Gallery in Vienna announced that they would be celebrating Keith Haring's 60th birthday with an exhibit dedicated to him. So if you consider yourself a Keith Haring fan and want to see some more of his lesser known works, definitely check out some of these images. And lastly, Juxtapoz sat down for an interview with Meg Atkinson. So if you're not familiar with the artist and want to see some of her work or just learn a little bit more about her creative processes as well, definitely worth a look and a read as well. Alright, and then moving on into fashion now. Brand Hyein Seo showed off their Spring-Summer 2018 collection, and even though there are a lot of boring concepts in here, there are some very interesting ones as well. Now let's just get the trash right out of the way. Most of these pieces, a lot of the more basic pieces, and a couple of the more patchworky pieces, just really trash, and exactly what you'd expect from a lot of Korean designers nowadays. Overused themes, stolen ideas from streetwear and luxury fashion houses, just done in a lot more poor senses, and overall really boring stuff. But setting those pieces aside for a second, there are a handful, and I mean a very few handful of pieces in here that really look like they put a lot of time and effort into them, and I'm just really kind of pissed about it, because if they put this much time and effort into the rest of the collection, it would be fantastic. But no, why be interesting when we can just be another Raf Simons and Yeezy ripoff just like everybody else in South Korea right now? So with that in mind, if they actually do decide to progress more in this really nice time and effort direction, I think they could do something really well for their brand in the future. Otherwise, it's just going to disappear like everybody else's brands in the next 3 to 5 years. Then Wacko Maria came together for a small capsule collection with artist Tim Lehi, and I'm a little bit torn on it, unfortunately. You see, as much as I really enjoy a couple of these pieces, like specifically the all-over prints, are absolutely fantastic. For as much as I like those, there is a problem with this capsule collection that really is something that affects a lot of capsule collections, all for the wrong reasons. Now, I understand that it is a capsule, it is meant to be small, but even with that being the case, I can't help but feel just having one print, one graphic, one design rehashed over and over and over again on a slew of different pieces is just really boring, no matter how good the graphic actually is. Which, in all honesty, is really fucking unfortunate too, because this is a pretty sick graphic. But I just have to tell myself, if this wasn't as cool and if this wasn't Wacko Maria, would I be giving them the same amount of bias? And the answer is no. So I gotta treat everybody the same, unfortunately. That said, however, if you do find yourself a fan of tattoo artist-inspired clothing and are maybe looking to pick up maybe a single piece with a single graphic or maybe just one all-over print, definitely check here first, some very cool pieces. Then Chinese label MYGE showed off their Spring-Summer 2018 collection, and it's not terrible, as we've slowly, and I mean very slowly, been getting an influx of Chinese streetwear designs into the media over the last couple months or so. I'm still trying to tread lightly on some of these brands. I can't really come to terms with them in the same way that I've seen with so many Japanese brands, so many Korean brands, because I really just don't know the extent of how well they can do, or if they're just copying other designs from brands as before. With that said, however, I can't really describe this brand as anything more than inoffensive. Like, to me, it just doesn't feel like there's a lot going on. Yes, there's a nice use of color, and there's a lot of different types of pieces as well too. I'm really interested in the amount of tops they're using. But even so, it's all really been done before, and there's nothing else to really say about it. The quality seems nice, the collection seems solid, but there's just nothing there, for better or worse, that is really ringing out to me as like, wow. Like, it just really doesn't have any wow factor. But then again, maybe that's exactly what they're going for. At the very least, it is good to see a couple more brands coming out of China and making their way into Western media shores, and at the very least, I'll be looking forward to more of their stuff in the future. Then brand Braindead showed off their Spring-Summer 2018 collection, and it's pretty solid as well. Now, as somebody who really doesn't consider themselves a huge fan of Braindead, it just doesn't really vibe with me too much. It's not really my style. I'm not a huge fan of the graphics or anything. Even with that in mind, I really do enjoy this collection. Like, just really nice detailing, really nice graphics, really nice color overall. And it really hates me that I have to say this, but it's just so nice and refreshing to see a brand that has always fallen under a certain aesthetic continue to follow that aesthetic. They're not trying to bite anybody else, they're not trying to copy anybody else's ideas or steal any ideas or anything along those lines. They're following their brand aesthetic and they're sticking to it, and at the very least, respect guys for that. So if you do find yourself in the need for a couple of new summer streetwear pieces, definitely start here first. Definitely some different pieces you won't find elsewhere. Then the Hundreds came together for their newest collaboration, this time with Bigfoot monster trucks, and all I can really say is, whose fucking idea was this? Like, Bobby, I get it. You've run out of ideas a long fucking time ago, and you're just relying on collaborations at this point. I fucking get it. But of all the collaborations you had to choose, Bigfoot monster trucks. Really? Like, who's even your fucking target market, dude? Like, what the fuck? Like, oh my god, like, who the fuck are you selling this to? Like, this can't just be me, right? Like, somebody else out there, please explain to me where the correlation is here. Like, who's this for? Like, who the fuck is this for? Like, more questions, they keep coming, and I still have no answers. Like, I'm just fucking speechless. So yeah, if you are the one fan who's still a fan of the hundreds and a fan of monster trucks, boy do I have a collection for you. Then Japanese brand Kidill showed off their fall winter 2018 collection, and I think they might have gone a little too far this time. For those of you unaware of the brand, let me just explain them briefly. Kidill is one of those very niche clothing brands that fits a subculture in Japan that's on the very punk and very experimental side of fashion. Think of it kind of as if Junjay made punk clothing, as terrifying as that might be. And although personally I don't find a lot of their pieces wearable from collection to collection, usually it's still within the boundaries of wearability. Unfortunately, this time around, I think they've kind of tiptoed that line a little bit too far and have begun to fall off the deep end. Don't get me wrong, it's not necessarily bad outside of the accessories. The accessories are bad. But going back to the pieces of clothing at hand, it almost feels more like costuming at this point. Like something you'd wear just for the shock or the horror or the excitement of it all. Not so much as a clothing piece as a part of a style or a fashion. And that's a little bit unfortunate, to say the least. Will that stop me from looking at their lookbooks from now on? No, not necessarily, but it will be harder to pull some inspiration from it from now on. At the very least, as much as I enjoyed the brand, I do hope they tone it down just a little bit next time. And lastly, Bape showed off their newest collaboration capsule, this time with legendary artist Keith Haring, and honestly, it just feels really lazy. As per usual with a lot of these Bape collaborations and capsule collections, there are a handful of really nice pieces in here. I really do think the jackets are very nice, but once you get past that, a lot of it just feels really copy-paste, very boring, and as I said, once again, very lazy. Like the rest of the capsule collection really falls off into two categories in my opinion. One, all over camo print with a Keith Haring print on top of it, or two, something that Uniqlo has already done once before and then throwing some kind of Bape graphic on top of that as well. And if you're already taking a very minimalistic piece of art such as something by Keith Haring and throwing your own graphic on it, and in doing so making a piece of clothing look more barren than it already had, now that takes some fucking skill. So unless you consider yourself the biggest of Keith Haring or Bape fans, for the time being, it might be a good idea to just stick to the Uniqlo collaborations. Alright, and finally let's move on to our articles for the day. And first up, Heddles did another nice little article, this time once again on leather jackets, but instead of going over the types of leather this time, they go over the style of jackets themselves. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the different styles of the more popular leather jackets and some companies that do sell some quality ones as well, definitely check this out. Then the New York Times put out a nice little article going over why H&M has so much unsold clothes, and they talk about some of the reasons why the business is failing for the time being and what's going to happen to a lot of the unsold clothes as far as economic impact or even environmental impact. So if that sort of thing interests you in all, or kind of what are some of the downsides of fast fashion, then I definitely give this article a check. Then the New York Times also put out another nice little article talking about how legendary fashion photographer Bill Cunningham left behind a memoir of sorts. And if you're not familiar with the man, there is a very nice documentary on Netflix about him, and I definitely think if you're a fashion person, it's definitely worth watching. But going off of that, they talk a little bit about his life here, a little bit about what the memoir entails, and if he or just fashion photography interests you in general, I would definitely give this a look. And lastly, Grail did once again another history of, this time of Vans skateboarding shoes. And in all honesty, this is by far one of the more in-depth articles I've seen on the history of the brand. So if they've ever been interested in Vans or skating in general, then I would definitely give this a check. very informative, very nicely written overall. Alright guys, and with that, we've reached the end of our first whiff for the week. As always, I hope you guys have enjoyed, and also as always, if you guys want to see any more images that I didn't include in the video today, or want to read any of the articles I talked about, I've linked everything down in the description down below. And as always guys, thank you very much for watching these videos and supporting my content. If you liked it, obviously leave a like. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe. And if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, or just want to talk fashion in general, always feel free to hit me up in the comments. I'm always willing to talk fashion. And as always guys, thank you once again. I hope you guys have a good couple days, and as always, until next time.